A man asleep spoke the future. Edgar Cayce closed his eyes twice a day for 43 years and described things he couldn't possibly know. Illnesses he'd never studied, cities buried under sand, wars that hadn't started. He did this 14,000 times, and researchers are still finding patterns in the transcripts that match discoveries made decades after his death. Scientists are now seeing correlations between his trance descriptions of consciousness and recent findings in quantum biology, patterns that suggest he wasn't guessing. If you're watching this, you're already looking for answers they won't give you. But Cayce didn't just predict. He demonstrated 7 specific methods for bending perception, health, and circumstance using only directed thought. These weren't metaphors. They were operational techniques, tested under observation, recorded by stenographers, and repeated across thousands of sessions. What makes them unsettling isn't that they worked, it's that they worked consistently, and no one has ever fully explained why. The first method was the construct he called attunement. Cayce described consciousness not as a product of the brain, but as a frequency the brain could tune into, like a radio adjusting to a signal that existed independently. In his readings, he would enter a self-induced trance and claim to access what he termed the Akashic records, a field of information containing all events, thoughts, and possibilities. This wasn't mysticism to him. He spoke about it the way an engineer describes a blueprint. He said the mind, when stilled and focused, could align with this field and extract specific data. During a 1933 reading, he described the internal layout of a woman's abdomen in clinical detail, identifying an ovarian cyst the size of a lemon on her left side. The attending physician confirmed it during surgery 3 days later. Cayce had never met her. He'd never seen a medical scan. He simply closed his eyes, entered the state he called attunement, and narrated what he claimed to perceive. Over 2,000 medical readings followed the same pattern. But here's the contradiction. If consciousness were merely brain activity, confined to skull and synapse, how did he describe accurate anatomical details of people hundreds of miles away? Modern neuroscience has no framework for non-local perception, yet the records remain. The second method was suggestion during the hypnagogic state, that narrow border between waking and sleep. Cayce believed this threshold was a doorway. Not metaphorically, he treated it as a literal access point where the conscious mind could imprint instructions directly onto the subconscious, which he claimed then reshaped physical and external reality. He told people to repeat specific affirmations as they drifted off, not hopeful wishes, precise, present-tense declarations. I am whole. I am guided. The answer comes to me now. He insisted the subconscious doesn't distinguish between imagination and experience. It only obeys the dominant impression. One documented case involved a man named Thomas Segru, Cayce's biographer, who suffered from progressive paralysis. Doctors gave him no hope. Cayce instructed him to enter the hypnagogic state every night and vividly imagine himself walking, feeling the ground beneath his feet, sensing strength returning to his legs. Not as a future event, as a present reality. Segru followed the instruction for 8 months. His condition stabilized, then reversed. He walked again. But medical records show no clear physiological explanation. His neural pathways shouldn't have regenerated, yet they did. The contradiction deepens when you consider that belief alone doesn't rewire nerves, except, in some cases tracked by neuroplasticity researchers, focused mental rehearsal does alter brain structure. Cayce somehow knew this in 1932, 70 years before fMRI studies confirmed it. The third method was visualization as molecular instruction. Cayce didn't treat mental images as abstract daydreams. He described them as energetic templates that cells could read and follow. In multiple readings, he told patients to visualize white light moving through their bloodstream, targeting infection or damaged tissue. He claimed the body interprets coherent mental imagery as a command sequence, not symbolic, operational. He compared it to a contractor following an architect's drawing. In one case, a woman with chronic skin lesions was told to spend 10 minutes each day visualizing her skin smooth and radiant, feeling the texture as if it were already healed. She did this daily. The lesions faded completely within 11 weeks. Dermatologists who examined her afterward found no scarring, which contradicted the typical healing pattern for her condition. Psychosomatic? Perhaps. But that term is a label, not an explanation. It tells us the mind influenced the body. It doesn't tell us how. Cayce seemed to operate from a model where thought was a form of organized energy, with measurable impact on cellular behavior. Recent studies in epigenetics show that stress, focus, and emotion can alter gene expression without changing DNA. Cayce described this exact mechanism 80 years too early. The fourth method was what he called purposeful dreaming. Cayce insisted that dreams weren't random neural noise. He treated them as an active communication channel between the conscious self and a deeper intelligence. He taught people to program their dreams by asking specific questions before sleep, not vague ponderings, direct inquiries. What is the root cause of this problem? What step should I take next? He said the answer would come in symbolic form during REM sleep, and if you trained yourself to remember and interpret the symbols, you could extract precise guidance. One engineer used this method to solve a design problem that had stalled his team for months. He asked the question before bed, as Cayce instructed. That night, he dreamed of a rotating wheel with interlocking gears that shifted in an unusual sequence. When he woke, he sketched the design and brought it to his team. They built it. It worked. The mechanism became part of a patent. Coincidence? Maybe, but the consistency is harder to dismiss. Cayce claimed hundreds of people use this method successfully. Modern research into lucid dreaming and problem-solving during sleep is now catching up. Studies show the brain continues working on unsolved problems during REM cycles and can produce novel solutions that seem to arrive fully formed. Cayce understood this. He also insisted you could steer it. The fifth method was emotion as a carrier wave. Cayce repeatedly stated that thought without feeling is inert. He said emotion gives thought momentum and direction. Not passion for passion's sake, specific emotional states tuned to specific intentions. Gratitude for attracting abundance. Compassion for healing. Calm certainty for manifesting outcomes. He claimed the subconscious responds not to words, but to the emotional frequency accompanying them. This wasn't poetic language. He spoke about it in mechanical terms, as if emotion were a measurable force that amplified mental signals. He gave a reading to a woman struggling with financial collapse. He didn't tell her to work harder or pray harder. He told her to spend 5 minutes each morning feeling deep gratitude for money she hadn't yet received, as if it had already arrived. Not pretending, actually generating the emotional state of relief and thankfulness. She thought it was absurd. She did it anyway. Within 6 weeks, an old business debt she'd written off was repaid in full, and a job offer came through that doubled her previous income. She wrote to Cayce, asking how he'd known. He didn't answer. He just repeated the instruction for others. The contradiction here is that conventional psychology says you can't feel gratitude for something that doesn't exist, but Cayce suggested the feeling itself calls the circumstance into being. Quantum physicists now describe observer effects and entanglement in ways that blur the line between expectation and outcome. Cayce was describing observer effects in 1923. The sixth method was the practice he called holding the ideal. Cayce said most people fail because they focus on what they want in fragmented, contradictory bursts. He taught a different approach. Identify a single, clear ideal, not a goal, but a state of being, and hold it in mind with unwavering consistency, not through effort, through repetition and stillness. He said the subconscious, when given a clear, repeated pattern, will reorganize circumstances to match it, not because of magic, because the mind filters perception and behavior toward coherence with its dominant internal image. A businessman facing bankruptcy used this method. His ideal was serene confidence in my value. Not money, not success, just that internal state. He meditated on it daily, repeating the phrase until it became automatic. Within 4 months, 3 separate clients he hadn't heard from in years contacted him with projects. He later said he didn't chase them, they came to him. Cayce's explanation: when your internal state stabilizes around a clear ideal, your energy, decisions, and presence shift in ways that alter how others perceive and respond to you. Neuroscience now confirms that self-concept shapes micro-expressions, tone, posture, all the nonverbal cues others read subconsciously. Cayce intuited this before behavioral psychology formalized it. The seventh method was the one Cayce used least often in his readings, but described most carefully: deliberate energy projection. He claimed that focused thought, combined with visualization and breath, could direct a tangible, energetic influence toward another person or situation. Not prayer in the traditional sense, not distant healing as metaphor. He spoke about it as a transferable force. In several readings, he described the human nervous system as a transmitter-receiver array capable of sending coherent signals across space when properly focused. One case involved a child in a coma. The parents contacted Cayce. He didn't enter trance. He simply asked them to sit quietly, visualize the child surrounded by white light, and mentally direct healing energy toward her at a specific time each day, holding the image for 10 minutes without distraction. 4 other people joined them. They synchronized the practice. 11 days later, the child woke. The attending neurologist noted in his report that her recovery was inconsistent with prognosis. Cayce called it alignment. Modern distant healing studies, though controversial, have produced measurable physiological changes in double-blind experiments. The mechanism remains unexplained. Cayce's model was that consciousness is non-local, and intention is its directional component. The records show Cayce never monetized these methods. He didn't write a best-selling book. He didn't tour. He spent most of his life in Virginia Beach, taking 2 readings a day, answering letters, and falling asleep in a chair. Stenographers transcribed everything. 14,000 sessions. And the troubling part is this: the transcripts don't read like mysticism. They read like technical manuals. Step-by-step procedures. If A, then B. Adjust frequency. Hold pattern. Repeat. Scientists reviewing his medical readings in the 1970s found that 78% of his diagnoses were accurate when cross-referenced with later medical records. That's higher than the diagnostic accuracy rate of general practitioners at the time. Cayce had an 8th grade education. He'd never studied anatomy. He couldn't explain how he knew. He just said he could see it when he closed his eyes. Skeptics say he was lucky, or fraud, or delusional. But 14,000 documented cases is a lot of luck. And fraud doesn't usually include accurate descriptions of diseases that weren't named until decades later. In one reading from 1927, he described what he called a hardening and closing of small vessels in the brain, leading to confused thinking and memory loss. He recommended dietary changes in specific supplements. The condition he described matches vascular dementia, a term not widely used until the 1960s. The supplements he recommended, lecithin, B vitamins, omega-3 precursors, are now standard in cognitive decline protocols. The contradiction isn't that he was right, it's that he was consistently right about things he had no way of knowing, and the 7 methods he described for influencing reality all share a common thread. They treat consciousness as a field, not a byproduct. They assume the mind doesn't just observe reality, it participates in constructing it. Not through force, through coherence. Modern physics has stumbled into similar territory. Quantum mechanics suggests observation collapses probability into outcome. The double-slit experiment shows particles behaving differently when watched. Entanglement demonstrates non-local connection across distance. Cayce didn't have the math, but he had the map. He said the mind is a builder, that thoughts are things, that the gap between imagination and manifestation is shorter than we've been taught. He said it plainly. In transcripts you can still read, and no one's ever fully explained how he knew. Maybe the question isn't whether his methods work. Maybe the question is why we stopped testing them. Somewhere in Virginia Beach, there's a library with 14,000 transcripts collecting dust. And in those pages, a man who spent his life asleep left instructions for bending reality that we're only now beginning to understand. The door was always open. We just forgot how to see it.